Tamaki, ex-reader. Quirk, personality change. Shy reader. You were at lunch with Muriel and his friends. You were talking with Handu, who was across from you, and Muriel was sat next to you. You turned your body so your legs rested on his lap. He smiled at you, and you smiled back. You turned your head and saw Tamaki looking at you through the strands of his hair. You felt your heart start to race a bit, and then you turned your head away and looked at Handu. Handu was still talking, as usual, and you just pretended to listen as you got lost in your own thoughts. You'd known Muriel since you were born, and his mother was friends with your mother, and your father knew each other. Then, when your parents left for a mission, they never made it back. But Muriel and his family took you in, so he's been like a brother to you ever since. Then you met Tamaki and Handu. Handu was the only other girl you knew besides Muriel's mother. Then Tamaki, he was just a very shy person, and that's what you two had in common. You didn't talk to anyone else but them, mostly Muriel. Everyone finds it weird that the weird shy girl is friends with the big three, but you don't know why they found out, only you're weird since Tamaki is the exact same. Muriel knew how you felt towards Tamaki, and he promised to keep it a secret, which you hoped he did. After lunch in classes, you all agreed to hang out at Muriel's in your place. As you were walking, you and Hunter were behind the boys, talking about stupid things, and Muriel began to whisper in Tamaki's ear, which made you a bit nervous. What did he tell him? Oh god, he didn't tell him that, did he? Does Tamaki know? Oh no, hopefully not. Please, oh god, tell me he didn't tell him. As you were mentally panicking, you noticed a raindrop fall on your shoulder. You looked up as soon as you did. The rain just poured down. You yelped at the sudden rainfall, which caused Tamaki and Muriel to turn around and look at you, but Tamaki walked over to you and handed you his bag. You blushed slightly and took it and used it for what you believed he wanted you to use it for. You pulled it over your head, and then before Tamaki could walk away, you handed him your bag. His eyes widened slightly, then looked into your eyes. You wanted to look away, but you didn't. Shook his head, and before you could leave, you snapped your fingers. He looked over at you with a gleam in his eyes and politely took my bag. There was no point in handing each other our bags since we already drenched. Handu pulled out an umbrella and she walked up next to Muriel. You slightly looked at Tamaki. He looked at you and smiled. You know, you look kinda cute, all flustered and red. He winked and took your hand. He kissed it, which made you blush harder and your body freeze like a deer in headlights. Then Tamaki looked in your eyes again. It's just so adorable. He winked and continued, walking next to Muriel. You shook your head and quickly walked ahead to the rest of the inn, and then you can get dressed. When you made it into the house, you instantly ran into your room and started looking for clothes. You wore grey sweatpants and your favourite colour t-shirt. You started to dry your hair and clothes as they were all in the living room, watching TV. You began untangling your hair, then you heard a knock at your door. Come in, you yelled, and continued brushing your hair. I just wanted to see if you were okay. You turned your head to the door and saw Tamaki. You instantly became flustered and nervous. No, I'm fine. It's okay. You stuttered. He nodded quickly and handed you a mug. I made you some tea. You blushed even more and took the mug. Thank you. You drank some tea and looked up at him. Your eyes locked and you both started blushing again. You looked down while sipping your tea awkwardly. You looked at him again and he didn't break eye contact yet. Is okay, or if I do something? You asked, placing your cup down next to your mirror. For what? He asked, getting nervous. You frowned slightly and held up your hand. I'm sorry, you whispered and snapped your fingers while looking into his eyes. His eyes got a gleam of his posture straightened. He stepped closer and shut your door behind him. He then began walking towards you. You began stepping backwards and then your back hit the front of your bed. You then grew red and looked down. He grabbed your chin and had you look up. Your name, why don't you notice me for a change? You know, you're all I think about. Every time I think I have you out of my mind, there you are, ready to interrupt my thoughts. I loved you since we were kids, ever since I met you. and had feelings about you. You just stared into his eyes, and you couldn't speak right at the moment. All you did was hold onto his wrists and lean in. He used his other hand to pull you closer back by your back. He gently kissed you and then pulled away. He lost in the gleam in his eyes. Uh, uh, your name? What just happened? He asked, backing away. You smiled and looked at the floor. I love you too, Tamaki. I also have since we were little kids. You looked up at him and his eyes were wide. His mouth hung over slightly. His face was blushing red. Really? Are you serious? You nodded and stepped closer. He smiled slightly and looked down at you. You did the same. He looked up at you and then he hugged you. You froze, not knowing what to do, but then he rested his head on your crook of your neck, making you jump and blush extremely. You then slowly brought your arms up and hugged him tightly as well. You moved your head to look at him, and he looked at you when you were both blushing and nervous, but both didn't back away or apologise. You both just stood there. Staring into each other's eyes, you both then began leaning and connecting your lips with his. You smiled slightly and then pulled away from the kiss and rested your forehead. So, does this mean we're together? Tamaki asked. You laughed and nodded. You picked up the tea and began drinking it. Come on, let's go, you said, taking his hand. He blushed in your sudden action and then nodded. He followed you up to the living room. You both sat down in available chairs and curled up next to each other. So, I'm guessing you two finally told each other, Andrew said, smiling. You both began to blush, but then nodded. Now you're dating? You both nodded again. She smiled. That's so sweet. You guys are such a... I love this show. Andrew focused on the TV again, and you both just smiled. He wrapped his arms around you and pulled you closer to him. You smiled and wrapped your arms around him. After lunch, the classes you all agreed to hang out in. No. Tell me you didn't hear him. Tell him? You blushed slightly and took it and used it. You believed he wanted to use it for your head. His eyes widened slightly, then took into your God. He then began walking towards you. Oh, for